multitasking here. But anyway, as we were saying, it brings an element of focus into the equation, into the exercise of contemplating our lives. Again, where have we been and where are we going? How well have we developed over the past year, and how far do we have to go? I know that this is something we can only do for ourselves individually. You can't do it for me, and I can't do it for you. And I know in respect to myself, I haven't developed as much as I would like to have, and I certainly have a long way to go. And I think that's something we do all share in common to a certain amount, and especially when it comes to considering these divine habits, the habits that God would like us to develop and work on as we go through our lives, our conduct and our human development. And that's really what this is all about. So we've gone through these. I won't spend a lot of time going and analyzing this again or introducing these to you, because I think you've all got quite familiar with this over the last many months. And so just to say that today we're working on number 6, are continuing to work on number 6, both in the study of these things and, of course, in the development and the application of these things to our lives. We're always working on these things. Habit number 6 is work together or synergize. And it's that element of synergy or the definition of synergy where together the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's really a wonderful definition of the ideal of an ecclesia, where the sum, together the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. The ecclesia together is greater than the sum of its individual members. So we had looked at the scriptural basis, and we were kind of in the middle, or maybe getting towards the end of the definition and the scriptural background of synergy, how we define it, and how the scriptures have, the kind of picture that the scriptures have given us of synergy in the many personalities, the scriptural personalities, and how they've used it. That's what we're doing right now. But we'll just briefly go through the definition again, the definition of synergy, and this is from Webster's Encyclopedic Dictionary, which is a very old dictionary, but it's interesting that it defines it as the doctrine that divine grace and human activity cooperate in the work of regeneration, a combined action of two or more which has a greater total effect than the sum of their individual effects. I thought that was pretty good. That basically sums up what we're trying to put out here today, and what we're trying to put out in this series. And we went through where this word synergy comes from, the etymology of it. It's based on the word sun, which is a primary preposition denoting union with or together, and sun or sin, S-Y-N, is the other equivalent, the English equivalent of S-U-N. So you have S-Y-N and ergi, sin ergi. Ergi is from the Greek word ergos, which means work. So it's together working, or working together. That's kind of the etymology of it. And so we went from there. We had already looked at all those, so I'm not going to go into and spend time on all of that again. We were kind of in the middle of going through the definition and scriptural background of synergy when we left off last time on the end of October. And we'd gone through these various quotations, and we'll just flash through them again. The disciples went out and preached everywhere. The Lord worked with them, so it's more than just the disciples working together. It was working with God, working with Yahweh, working with Jesus. And from Romans 8 and 28, Paul says, we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to His purpose. So here it's all things, all the elements, all the activities in our life. Everything that happens to us really is a synergy in our lives. We're together the whole. Everything, if you put all the things, and you can go and get to the end of your life and look back on your life and see all the things that have happened to you, and say that the whole of that is greater than the sum of all the individual things that have happened to you. And that's kind of how Paul was when he looked back over his life. And he says, I've fought a good fight. I've finished the course. He could see the big picture, where all the little things that some of them weren't so little. He was stoned and left for dead many times. And he says, I can see now where all that has worked together, and the sum of all those things individually have accumulated to the sum of them all are greater than if you were to look at each of them individually, the good that come out of each of them. And in 1 Corinthians 16, verse 16, he says, I urge you to be subject to such men and to every fellow worker. That's the same idea there. And as God's fellow workers, we urge you not to receive God's grace in vain. And then he takes us back. You see how Abraham's faith and deeds worked together again. Faith and deeds working together. Not just faith individually, not just works individually, but you put the two of those things together, and the whole is greater than the sum of each of them as separate items. And we looked at the other phrasing that comes from that sunergos, and the various places that word is used. Greet Priscilla and Aquila, my fellow workers in Christ Jesus. We are God's fellow workers. You are God's field. You are God's building. Again, that element of working together with God. And again, the sum of that whole, not just Yahweh, not just us, but the whole thing together is greater than the sum of everything else that would be put together as individuals. Not that we lord it over your faith, but are fellow workers for your joy, for by faith you stand. And the English majority text version, that is the English majority text version. Not that we lord it over your faith, but are fellow workers for your joy. And what he was talking about in lording it was a reference to negative synergy, where he was saying that's something you don't do. You don't lord it over others. He rebuked, and Paul argued, and Paul persuaded, but the one thing that Paul never did was to exercise control or to manipulate or have dominion over the convictions of others. Our convictions are a very personal thing, and we must never attempt to make someone believe something. We can discuss things and look at Scripture and analyze it, but eventually we have to come to our individual convictions and conclusions on these things. And of course we have to agree on the basic elements. We have to agree on the things concerning the kingdom of God in the name of Jesus Christ. But there's a lot of places where patience comes into play, where we have to do with things to do with walk and conduct and human development. That's all a thing that's it works in a progression. It's in progress, and we have to be patient with each other on those things. And Paul expressly displayed that kind of patience. Christ explained to his disciples the critical balance and equilibrium that must prevail in all our ecclesial relationships. He said in Matthew 23, verses 8 to 10, and this is from the Contemporary English Version, it says, none of you should be called a teacher. You have only one teacher, and all of you are like brothers and sisters. None of you should be called a leader. the Messiah is your only leader. And that is so true. The true principle of discipleship is that we are all in this together. No one more so or less so than the other, working for the same thing, toward the same goal, no one with any preeminence over the other. And that's what forms the basis of spiritual synergy. And Paul said in Philippians, in the letter to Philippians, chapter 2, verse 25, says, "Yet I suppose it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother and companion in labor, and fellow soldier, but your messenger, and he that ministered to my wants." So again, that was that same word that's used. Anything that's underlined in these passages is this word, synergos. And that's how it's translated in our Bible. Companion in labor here. And in 1 Thessalonians 3 and 2 it says, "And Timothy, our brother and minister of God, and our fellow laborer in the gospel of Christ, to establish you and encourage you concerning the faith." Again, that element of synergy, where we're not lording it over one another and trying to manipulate each other, but trying to work together in this relationship. Then we have the word sunesis. And sunesis is a mental putting together. This has more to do with the mental synergy, putting things together mentally. And it's interesting to look sometimes where these come from, the root that these words come from. It's from the G4920 in the Strong's Dictionary. And that takes us here, syneemi. And it means mentally to comprehend, to put together mentally, by implication to act piously. And it's translated consider, understand, be wise. And of course, in the only reference we have in the Old Testament that uses the same word in Greek, that the word is used 108 times in the Septuagint, as the Greek equivalent of the Hebrew word for spiritual understanding, and it occurs 34 times in the New Testament. So it's used anywhere in the Old Testament where the idea was kind of a spiritual or mental putting together of God's ways. That was the word that was used for that. For example, in Judges 11 verses 37 and 38, synesis is used by the Septuagint as a Greek equivalent of the Hebrew word translated fellows and companions in the King James. We have a reference here from Exodus. Again, this is where in the Septuagint this was the word that was used in reference to this individual. "I have filled him, Bezaleel." And we know who he was. He was the person that was in charge of many of the things that went into the building of the tabernacle and its things that went into the tabernacle. It says, "I have filled him, Bezaleel, with the Spirit of God, in wisdom and in understanding." That's the word. In understanding, or synesis. And in knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship. This is the whole passage here. And he was Bezaleel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. Joshua, the son of Nun, also was filled with the spirit of wisdom. Again, the same word, synesis, in the Septuagint. That's the word they used for it. Wisdom. Being able to put things together mentally, the things concerning God, and understand it. And of course, we had looked, I think, last time at this reference from Judges 11, where it was used in terms of Jephthah's daughter, where she went with her companions and put things together mentally about the wisdom of the situation that they were in. God said to Solomon, "Since this is your heart's desire, and you have not asked for wealth or riches or honor, nor for the death of your enemies, and since you have not asked for a long life, but for wisdom and knowledge." The word knowledge there is the word that is considered there the equivalent to synesis, or being able to mentally put these things together. And he says, since you've done that, therefore wisdom and knowledge will be given to you. I will give you wealth and riches and honor and all the other things that God gave him as well. And then we come to the New Testament where this word is used. It says, by which when you read you may understand my knowledge in the mystery of Christ. That is Paul with reference to those to whom he was writing say that, you know, when you read these things you'll understand where I'm coming from and how I've considered these things and put them together in my mind. And when he writes to Colossians, he says that their hearts may be encouraged, being knit together in love. These are all phrases that have very, very much to do with synergy. Being knit together in love, in agape, and attaining to all riches of the full assurance of understanding, to the knowledge of the mystery of God. Putting the mystery of God together mentally and being able to discern it is what's being spoken of here. Both of the Father and of Christ. Knowing how God has worked these things out in His purpose. And that was up until Christ and the apostles appeared on the scene was quite a mystery. All the prophecies concerning that, it was hard for them to really understand fully what the purpose of the Messiah was in the overall purpose of God and what He was to accomplish. There were a lot of prophecies concerning Him, and many of the Jews to this day don't understand that. Most of the Jews don't. Their hearts are hardened. They have a veil over their eyes. We know that the prophecy says that at one day that will be taken away from them, and they will understand. But it was a mystery. But to be able to discern that, and to be able to read what Paul has given us, and the other apostles, is putting all this together mentally and understanding it. That's the word synesis. And again, for 2 Timothy 2:7, consider what I say, and may the Lord give you understanding, give you the ability to put these things together mentally and understand His great overall spiritual purpose. So that's the word synesis. That's the sun and isis put together. Syneami. That's the final one that we'll look at here. This word syneami means, again, to mentally comprehend. So it's just it's the same idea, just a little different word. It was the root from which synesis came from. See how it's used here. Again, let him who boasts boast about this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord. Now this again is from the Septuagint, and the Septuagint has shown us that this is the word, the Greek word that they have used to express the Hebrew word that was originally put in there and translated understands, if you can grasp what I'm trying to say here. Let him who boasts boast about this, that he understands and knows me, that I am Yahweh, who exercise kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth, for in these I delight, declares Yahweh. And then we go to the New Testament and see the application, or how it's translated in the New Testament. He opened their minds so they could understand the Scriptures. Now, what was that in reference to? That was in reference to His conversation with the two disciples on their way to Emmaus. And they were going from Jerusalem. They were walking and kind of shuffling along, and could not figure out how all this was working out. The one that they had looked for, that was supposed to come and deliver them from the Romans, was dead. He was in the grave. Well, the one they had believed in, where is he? And then Christ came up alongside them and explained to them, starting from the beginning of the Old Testament and take them right through all the prophecies. Then He opened their minds so they could understand. Paradigm shift. Aha! It all came together. And, the whole was greater than the sum of the parts of all those passages. And they could see the big picture. And that's really what is meant by that word syneami. Now there's, go on to a little the next part of this, and in the definition, looking at the scriptural background of synergy, it has a very strong affiliation to fellowship. And it has a very close connection. Fellowship and synergy are very close in Strong's, and we can kind of see that here. Koinonia is partnership, meaning it's a participation, a social intercourse, and benefaction, to communicate, communion, distribution, fellowship, are the words that it's translated by, the English words that translated that word koinonia in our English translations. That's the words. Communicate, to communicate, communication, communion, contra-distribution, distribution, fellowship. And it says that that's from the Greek word that is referenced as G2844. So we go to that, and so what it's saying is this word koinonia is taken from this word koinonos, and it means a sharer, an associate, and is translated as companion, fellowship, partaker, partner. And if we track that down the line, peel off another layer, as it were, of these words, it says that's from the Greek reference G2839, and it's koinos, and it means common. Common in the sense of being shared by all. We have it in common. And of course, by that, from that, there's another meaning to common, and it can mean profane. It's just a common thing. It's not special. So in that sense, it was used as profane. But in the sense of fellowship, it's used in the sense of being shared by all, or several. And it's translated common, or from that other meaning of it as profane, it's translated also as defiled, unclean, and unholy. So there's two meanings from that, and we have to be careful when we read this word to know the context in which it's being given, as to which of these would apply, whether it's common, positive, something to be shared by all, or profane in a negative sense, in the sense of defiled and unclean. So be careful of the context. But anyway, to follow and peel off another layer of that, we get right back to the very root of the word from which fellowship comes. It's the very root on which the word fellowship is based. All these other words here they grow out of the root of this. They're all like a tree growing out of this. This is the root, sun. It's a primary preposition denoting union, with or together. And that's the word that we're studying. We've already looked at that. But we just wanted to show here how that all is so beautifully linked. It's like you say, it's like a tree growing from a root. So fellowship is a tree. Our ecclesia is a tree. The fellowship we have together, it comes from that root, sun, meaning together. And if we're not together, we really don't have an ecclesia. If we're not together mentally and spiritually, we really don't have the rest of it. We have to be really, it's really very essential to understand that. So that's our definition and background of the word. And the next thing we want to just briefly is take a look at synergy in creation and nature. Today we read the creation chapter, Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2 to a large extent, the creation chapters. And it's interesting to look at synergy in reference to all of that. Synergy is a metaphor of the body, and it's used it's used in that sense by Paul in his letter to the Corinthians in chapter 12. He talks about the body being one, and as the body is one and hath many members, and all the members of that one body being many are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we are all baptized into one body, whether we be Jews or Gentiles, whether we be bond or free, and have been all made to drink into one Spirit. What we read today in the 2nd chapter of Genesis is really an analogy where the woman was taken from the side of the man. Was one of the ribs was taken, and just like the ecclesia is taken from the side of Christ, and becomes the helpmeet for Him. And it's really quite an analogy. The ecclesia is a body that has been created by God, and that's what Paul is using here as this analogy of this body. The body is not one member, but many. If the foot shall say, because I am not the hand, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the ear shall say, because I am not the eye, I am not of the body, is it not therefore of the body? He's talking here, all these various parts we have are really, when you put them all together, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. If the whole body were an eye, where were the hearing? If the whole were hearing, where were the smelling? But now God has set the members, every one of them in the body, as it hath pleased Him. And if they were all one member, if we were all eyes, where were the body? If we were all hands, where's the rest of the body? But now are they many members, yet one body? It takes a lot of parts to make one body. The eye cannot say unto the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. Nay, much more those members of the body which seem to be more feeble are necessary. And those members of the body which we think to be less honorable, upon these we bestow more abundant honor, and our uncomely parts have more abundant comeliness. For our comely parts have no need, but God hath tempered the body together, having given more abundant honor to that part which lacked, that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care one for another. And whether one member suffer, all members suffer with it. Or one member be honored, all the members rejoice with it. Now ye are the body of Christ. We're taken out of Christ. We're a part of Him, and members in particular. So I read that, basically the whole section, because I think it's so important here to the understanding of this word synergy and how it applies to us as an ecclesia, and really to the whole group of believers worldwide, and how we're all really together in this. So it's more than just hands and arms and legs and feet and brain and stomach and heart and all the other organs and muscles thrown together. The body is a miraculous synergistic whole that can do many wonderful things by very virtue of the way it all works together. Think of your body and what we do with our hands and the posture that we maintain, that it speaks, it's body language, but it's all the parts working together to form that posture that someone looking at us can say, oh, he's downcast today, or he's not feeling too happy, or boy, he's excited, or she's really feeling good. It's not just a smile on the face, it's the way the whole body postures that shows that. So the body communicates. And the body does things. It works. It functions. When we walk, it isn't just our feet moving, it's our legs and our hips and our arms all working together. This is sometimes called coordination. Sometimes when injury occurs, this coordination is diminished or lost, and individual parts might still move and be able to do things in and of themselves, but without that coordination, the result becomes rather pathetic and clumsy. So this relationship between the parts, this coordination, is a part in itself. It is just like another body part. We can't see it or feel it, but it's there. And it's very essential. And so it is in the ecclesia, because it affects the way the parts interact with one another. And an example of that is hand-eye coordination. And it's you say that person has very, very good hand-to-eye coordination. Well, we know what that means. Without that, where video games, for example, is a very good example of where that hand-to-eye coordination is so necessary. And without that, you wouldn't be able to play them. And so it is in the ecclesia. We need coordination to be able to work together and function together. Two eyes synergistically working together. When you close one eye, you lose a dimension. You become two-dimensional. You see two-dimensionally. But when you open the other eye, all of a sudden you see depth. And that's the third dimension. We have a lot today being spoken of as 3D television and everything. But it's like it's jumping out at you. It gives you the depth perception. And when you understand the technology behind 3D, and it really is two pictures there, and you need a special set of glasses to be able to discern the 3D, to see the depth. But God has made us so wonderfully that in natural circumstances, when we have the two eyes, we can see that other dimension, the third dimension. Two ears working together not only hear the sound better than one ear alone, but also create a third dimension. You can perceive depth and direction of sound. And I think blind people understand this better than anyone else. When they lose the sight of the eyes, they understand how far they are from an object by the sounds around them. All nature is synergistic. It's described by this term ecology. Ecology is that delicate but wonderful, miraculous balance that causes all the various parts to blend together harmoniously, and we call it the balance of nature. And that balance is also like a part, and it has to be present. In the ecclesia, there has to be balance. Two pieces of wood placed on top of the other are many times stronger when bonded or laminated together by glue. And if you put a bunch of 1x4s on top of the others, you put 12 1x4s on top of each other flatwise and bond them together by glue, the strength of those 12 are going to be equivalent probably to many times greater than just the sum of each of them alone. And I think an engineer would understand that. So these are all very important lessons to us as we go forward as a group, as an ecclesia, and understand the tremendous advantage that God has given us, this wonderful blessing and ability in our functioning together. And I think we'll leave it at that point for today, and consider how the work of Christ has functioned so well and has synergized so well in the overall purpose of God to bring His purpose into of condemning sin in the very flesh, in its very flesh that it was formed in. Such a wonderful thing, and could not have been done without a divine synergy in operation.